Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join and then we'll start the webinar. So good morning, everyone. On behalf of Southpaw and the Kite Factory, I'd like to welcome you to the Midlife Revolution, where we're going to be sharing some new research and having a very important conversation about midlife women and how poorly they are represented by brands and media, and yet how powerful they are as consumers. The event is actually a rerun of a successful summer session where we noticed a striking absence of men. Only 4% of people in the room, to be exact, were men. And this really isn't a women's issue. It's an issue for everyone. That's why we've intentionally targeted this event today towards men to help them better understand this audience so we can all drive much more meaningful change. I'm Nikki Jones, Head of Strategy at Southpaw, the strategic creative agency for challenger brands. And I'm here today with Charlie Day, who is kind of a strategy and insights director for the Kite Factory media agency. Together, we're going to be presenting the key findings from our research. And we're also joined by three fantastic panelists who I will introduce you to in just a minute. So the plan for this morning is myself and Charlie are going to share some highlights from the quant and the qual research that we've conducted. And it's worth saying at this point that we haven't included a lot of information today, but you're all invited to have a one-to-one with Southpaw, the Kite Factory, or both. And we can discuss how we can share a bit more and help you. And then we're going to have a discussion with the panelists, drawing from their professional experience, how and where we can drive change in better representation of midlife women. So just a little bit more about who's going to be involved today. Charlie Day is strategy director at the Kite Factory. She has many years of experience in communications, having previously worked with NSPCC and WaterAid before joining the Kite Factory in 2022. Her passion really lies in crafting campaigns that put authentic stories at their core, demonstrating that individuals, regardless of their age, are not defined by their demographics. We also have Bronte, who is a senior insight analyst at Channel 4, where she draws upon insights to help advertisers to be more authentic and inclusive. She also works across Channel 4's award-winning Insight initiative, which I hope you are familiar with. It's called Mirror on the Industry, and it's a deep dive into representation of minority groups in TV, advertising, and the steps that brands can help to improve representation. Then we have Dino. Dino wears many hats. He is founder of the Barbershop, which is a strategic consultancy for media and communications. He's also a board member of the UK Effies, the Marketing Society, and Brixton Finishing School. And he's part of the Conscious Advertising Network and a founding member of Media for All. I would really love to understand, Dino, how you managed to do that all in one life. Sadly, we don't have Heather. She's just called in sick, I'm afraid. So she's founder of Gen M, the menopause partner for brands, and she is a fantastic force for good. So do look her up and try and understand a bit about Gen M. They're a fantastic organization, really pushing things forward for women. But we do have instead Glenn Smith, who is my creative partner at Southpaw, and he will be bringing some glittering conversation, I'm sure. And then a bit more about myself. I'm head of strategy at Southpaw. I am fascinated by human behavior, how and why people think, and how we can create some really simple transformations through a combination of behavioral science and smart creativity. I'm also an accredited coach and an NLP practitioner, and I run a personal brand consulting company too. So a little bit more about why we're here today. So according to Forbes, 50% of midlife women feel invisible. And according to Global Web Index, only 6% of midlife women feel represented in the advertising they see. So there really are a lack of Gen X women on our screens, in our feeds, in our conversations. If they are seen, they're often portrayed as insecure and frazzled, desperately trying to hold on to their youth. And the narrative is often about what they've lost or what they're losing, not what they've gained. Being in this club myself as well, I do get frustrated about the lack of marketing oxygen that's taken up or that gets given to this audience of midlife women. Instead, Gen Z get all the noise. We're not anti-Gen Z in any way, but when I look around at the cohort of women in the midlife that I know, there's a group of really interesting, fascinating women who deserve to be better represented. So plenty of reasons why we're here. The conversation has definitely started, but there's often a focus on the problem and not what we can do about it. The focus today will be really on what can be done, and that's where the emphasis will be. Usually the first question people say is, what is the definition of a midlife woman? So our definition is women between 45 and 54, so that 9-year age group. So hopefully then you'll agree that more and better representation of midlife women is needed. If you still need convincing, there's two more big arguments. One is commercially. Forbes call them super consumers. They have huge economic power. Unlike our mothers and our grandmothers, they're responsible for 95% of all household spending decisions, outspending younger women by 250%. And when you get to understand a bit more about them shortly, you realize that there's some significant life changes that are happening for these women, which means they're reassessing everything from the car they drive to the holidays they go on to where they live to who they're married to. And it's a really powerful opportunity for brands to get in with them at this time and get it right. And then lastly, morally, advertising, marketing shapes how we behave and what we believe as consumers. We've got a responsibility as this group really to help change things. And if we can get it right, the results will be felt across the board. So just before we go into our highlights of the learnings we've got from all the research, I'm just going to set the scene with three key drivers that seem to be fueling the problem of poor representation. And the first is, as a society, we do have an obsession with youth. Youth are exciting, they're creative. And still today, the vast majority of brands, even those whose shoppers are midlife women, continue to use younger women to model, to advertise them. You just have to look at the high street and it's pretty much a blanket approach. We continue to infantilize women with retouching and casting much youthful portrayals of women. You know, Barbie, The Substance, two massive films of the last 2 years, the storyline was portraying portrayals of these women chasing their youth. The second driver is polarized stereotypes. So women in our research really noted these extremes. They're quite obvious. You see younger women and then older women represented, but very few clear identities depicted for this age in the middle that resonate. Motherhood is very well represented, and then it jumps to grandparents. We did have a fantastic quote in the groups where a woman said, "You're either a cougar trying to be 25 with Botox, or you're exchanging parsnips with your neighbor in an advert for funeral planning." There is huge frustration at the cliches, the caricatures, and these superficial stereotypes that can be really alienating and, quite honestly, very irritating for this group of women. And then lastly, box ticking and meaningless representation. So women we spoke to called this out, this sort of tokenism, you know, showing an older person or a midlife person in a lineup of women just because a brand needs to show they're making some effort. They hunger for more than just box ticking. They want brands to demonstrate that they're understood and really listened to. We're missing this emotional connection that really resonates, this meaningful representation. Brands need to offer more than just role models. So more role models and not just models. You know, it's very contrived, and quite often you see brands doing maybe a good job above the line with midlife women, then you get into store, pick up a pack, and it's still got a young model on the front of it. So it needs to be carried through. It needs to be more meaningful. So we need to close the gap in representation and move the conversation forward. And how we can do that is by really listening and then showing women that they're heard. So we did just that. And this is a collection of some of the women we spoke to. So we've done a lot of research over the last 12 months, big lot of quant research, qual groups, one-to-one in-depth interviews. The goal of all of this was really to understand what matters to these women and how brands can play a role in solving and resonating with these emotional needs. We tested imagery and language. We got some homework in there. I guess the first question was, what do we call these women? So I personally have an issue with this name, the title Midlife Women. It feels very negative. If you're halfway through a race, you're halfway towards the end. It doesn't reflect the empowerment and the opportunity for these women. Gen X is the old school name. This is the Americanism, the Queen Ages. Thanks to Greg Wallace, we've got a resurgence of this, women of a certain age, or perhaps even worse, those past their prime, the condescending definition. We tried a new name for them in the groups. We had a little chat about this. This name Bloomers, inspired by a blossoming, a new age, becoming much more positive and natural. They didn't like this either. They don't want to be labeled. The reality is, though, this is how they refer to themselves. We are the lost group. So a really sad insight into how they really feel. And we've all got a responsibility to change this. So we've consolidated a lot of our learning into just some key facts. We've called facts and acts. So we're looking at what have we learned and then how can we apply these? What are some of the things that brands can do in response to knowing this? And we've looked at it through a lens of what kind of brand activities, but then some media activities as well. Excuse me. So the first insight we have is that this 9-year age group of midlife women is not one homogenous cohort. There are stark differences between the women, but there are also some commonalities as well. It's hard to generalize, but for marketing purposes, we did find 4 really clear distinctive groups, and let me talk you through those now. So the first group of women, 45 to 54, that have never had kids. Now, this group of women are the most underrepresented of all of the midlife women. They're interesting because they're experiencing some independence now. Some of them don't have to work quite as much as they have, but there's a restless relentlessness to feeling like they're in a bit of a rut. They have no clear milestones. They're the most likely to be anxious. They really they're risk averse. They're relying on the opinions of others. They really need greater support. Midlife women with younger kids, so under 15, for them, they're the best represented of all the groups because motherhood gives them a really strong sense of identity. They're time squeezed, we know that, but they do have quite a good sense of their identity at the moment. Those with older kids at home, so kids over 16, there's a lot going on emotionally. It's a very turbulent time for them, muddle and reappraisal. Perhaps their kids don't need them sort of on the case the whole time, so they've got a bit more space, a bit more time for themselves, but they don't know what that looks like at the moment. They don't know how to fill that and how to have that purpose. And then those that have where their kids have left home, still midlife, but their kids are over 16 and perhaps moved on to uni, so they themselves are moving beyond that family life stage, and that brings a sense of freedom. There's new space to be filled, but they don't know how. So brands need to recognize there's some real nuances in these groups with individual challenges, and each group is very, very powerful, and we need to look at how we can empathize and validate them better at these stages. The second big insight that we discovered about Gen X women was this real sense of, I feel lost, I feel stuck, who am I now? And partly this is driven by the fact that when you're younger, there's a great quote here, when I was a teenager, you're told you're going to go to uni, get married, have kids, your life is programmed out ahead of you. And now there's a sense of like, what does that look like? Was that a waste of time? What should I be doing now? It's wide open for them, and they're often feeling like they're flatlining, they're going nowhere. They struggle with a sense of identity. They're struggling to find myself in the middle of everything, even though they are at the heart of everything. They're looking after kids, their work, they're caring for their older parents, but they feel unnoticed and that their needs are unmet. I feel a bit like I don't matter. A lot of things out there in society about women being sexually attractive. That's the purpose. You hit a certain age and you're no longer sexually viable, so you're sort of sidelined. Then what is our purpose? They're looking for meaning, somewhere where they can add and have value beyond their looks or as a caregiver, where they can contribute to the world beyond just a family. In fact, many of them wanted to shed their layers of kind of identity that came from motherhood and find something new. But again, they're looking to find that. They're struggling to find what and who they are now. Those with older children often felt especially lost. This quote here from a lady who was struggling. She was going to bed at 9 p.m. every evening because she had a real sense of, I don't know how to fill this. I've got nothing better to do. She hadn't found that purpose for her. And then some of them struggling because they've lost their courage, the courage that they used to have when they were younger. That seems to be draining away, and that might be due to the menopause. It might be due to general lack of confidence, but they're really frustrated by this. So how can we act as brands? What can we do to help? So just some suggestions here. One, help women understand and navigate this change, not just physically, through menopausal symptoms, etc., but also emotionally. Help to normalize it. Some of them are feeling a sense of abnormality and shame at this time. Present ways to help them feel more independent and in control of themselves and their identity. There's lots of opportunity to really help unlock a sense of moving forward or personal growth, help them move from feeling like they're flatlining to maybe feeling more unstoppable. Lots of opportunities for brands to get in there with, whether it's through technology or travel, learning new skills, new careers, wellness, sexual wellness. Consider how things like spirituality and nature and exercise and creativity can help ground them and help them feel like a sense of knowing who they are. And then lastly, stop pigeonholing women as this sort of caregiver or enabler role. There's so many more roles. Present a role that goes beyond that through the strength, the wisdom, some of them really wanting to sort of rebel and be change makers. This is super exciting for them.
So how can media placement have an impact? It's really worth considering that TV, radio, magazines are the most meaningful channels for this cohort of women. So our first tip is to use these channels to deliver content that really helps with their personal growth, help women feel less stuck, opposed to some versions of social media that these women feel that scrolling is completely meaningless. The second point is timing is really essential in successful media planning. This age group have much higher confidence levels in the mornings, and it slowly declines the day chips away at them. So think about how you can use your media to serve up content that gives a confidence boost in the morning, but then again, content that helps recharge or be more social in the evening. And lastly, definitely capture this group's attention by offering value for them whilst they're doing things for others, because 71% of these women think that multitasking is the best way to get things done. So how can multiple channel approaches work together? So think radio on the school run or podcasts on the commute. How can you integrate your media into their busy lives is a really helpful way to think about it.
The third insight, I need to be heard and valued. So we've talked about these women wanting to be represented, but being visible for this group of women is much less about being seen and more about being heard. And I think that's a really important distinction that we uncovered in the groups. They don't just want to be seen, they want to be heard. And there's a huge frustration at being ignored. I'm saying all these things, but no one is listening. That's when you feel invisible. They want their voices, their thoughts, their feelings and opinions to be listened to and to matter. They want to be center stage after years and years of putting everyone else first. And this is a really exciting and powerful time of life for these women. They're entering a bit of a new stage of their life, and many of them have got experience of the big shit. Some of them have had kids, they've experienced bereavement or divorce, job losses, financial crisis, maybe abusive relationships. These women are wise and they've got a real inner confidence in their belief and their sense of value, what they can bring. They want that opportunity to be able to share it. I feel it's my duty to speak up and say things that other people won't say. I feel happy that this age has brought me that confidence. I feel empowered more than ever. And just the process of the events that we've been holding and the groups that we've been having has allowed women to say things like this. I just feel like being on this group today, hearing us all talk, I've been seen. They want more opportunities to do that. And this is a kind of a brilliant quote. I'm not even the star of my own movie. It's their life, and they're not even the main character. They want to be center stage. So how can we act? So it is really important, I think, that we don't just try to solve representation with visual box ticking. Invite more thoughts and opinions from women, rely less on photographic shortcuts, and prioritize storytelling that goes much deeper, using real voices, real quotes, real sound bites, better copywriting. If you can, bring forward the women behind your brand, because when women know that other women are talking to them and sharing advice or products, whatever, it brings credibility and empathy. The worst thing is an anonymous brand trying to empathize with this audience, because it just won't cut it. Invite their feedback. What initiatives can you as brands, media partners do to bring women to your conversation, into your brand? Help them co-create, help them participate, because they've got a lot to add. And where you can create a community feel with genuine groups of women who can guide, who can empathize, who can provide, can be role models, can be a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah, from a media perspective, this was definitely the most interesting part of the research for me. So audio media has their attention, right? So 60% of Gen X women said when they're alone, they listen to the radio in the background. So think about how Gen X women can help be heard by prioritizing audio content, and especially audio content that drives personal growth and helps with their well-being. Our YouGov data also highlighted that podcasts were also in their most trusted media spaces. To think about how podcasts can think and fit seamlessly into people's routines, whether it's offering education or entertainment. And finally, there's incredible women in this audio space, right? So Gabby Logan is always in the top 10 podcasts. So think about how you can partner with female creatives who represent the voice of Gen X women. It will strengthen your brand affinity. It will foster really authentic connections. It's really important these women respect the voices they listen to, though, and identify them. So it needs to be authentic. But there's loads of opportunities with audio and podcasts. It's really fascinating.
Number 4, these women really want to be defined by their mindset, not by their age, because age is just one dimension, and so as well is menopause. So these women don't want to be known as the menopause generation, even though it is such an important and impactful part of their life. They want to be defined much more by their mindset. They resist being labeled by their age, because that's too one-dimensional, and they don't see themselves as one-dimensional. Generalization based on age really undermines the many layers of their identity. They're very nuanced. And many of them have accrued a real attitude of caring less about what other people think about them. Everybody experiences midlife differently. Some are the fittest they've ever been. Some of them are complaining about eyesight and knees deteriorating. Some of them feel that they look younger than the people they see, the women they see in media and communications, and other of them feel older. So when you see age, like this is what 50 looks like, you look great at 50, there creates this cognitive dissonance, because it's an impossible way to match up what age looks like in their own self-perceptions. So can we just, I can't see that bit of the screen. Can we just, can't read it. Apologies. Instead of pointing out our age, saying, there, it's okay, you've still got it. That's so annoying. I'm not my age. I'm not just my age. I'm so much more than that. And then lastly, I don't care anymore. If someone doesn't like something, I don't care. People who are moody or don't agree with you, I just let people have their own opinions. So their mindset is a really, really powerful thing. And that's what they want to come forward. So how can we act as brands? How can we help? So firstly, recognize that age is not their identity. exercise extreme caution about allowing targeting to show through in copy or visual shortcuts. Instead, cue relevance to them through insight and subtlety, not this kind of headline labeling like this is 50, you look great at this age, because middle age really isn't understood and it's not the same for everyone. And I think really interesting if brands can start to emulate this tone of voice with these women. If you're an outlaw brand or if you're a maverick or a jester, this attitude, fuck it, I don't care. And many of them talked about themselves as being the fuck it generation. Like we've got like an attitude and a mindset that defines us, not our age.
Yeah, I think 8% of these women said they're really less likely to care what other people think of them compared to other age groups. And I think mindset is probably the most important media point to land, because media planning has evolved. So it's more than targeting one mass group by their age now. And so age is just a number, right? But I really felt in these groups, it has to be the right number. 50 is not 30. For these women, 50 is 50, and being fabulous at 50 is really important. And there are lots of nuances with this age group. So I think with this one, definitely consider moving beyond demographics in your media planning. Focus on people's lifestyles, interests, their attitude. There's a lot of attitude at this age. And to make a long-term impact in media, your audience insight, they have to be really authentic to resonate. I think one of the really lovely quotes we heard in the qual was, why do we always look drunk on sherry? Why am I always portrayed as this kind of crazy laughing woman? So I think having an authentic mindset and doing proper audience insight and audience segmentation is really key to media planning.
Brilliant. And then number 5, aspiration to these women is a vibe. It's not a look. So we had a big question going into the research is, do these women aspire to a younger look? Do they want to see younger women being reflected back at themselves? And we tested lots of imagery to see what they engage with. But we learned quickly that doing it visually was wrong. We have to connect with them on a deeper level. What women really aspire to is not a look, but it's a feeling, a vibe. A look is superficial and it's not where they get their confidence from. So as you get older, there's this huge gulf, because what other people see as aspirational, you don't want to aspire to anymore, because there's more to you than what other people see. I hate advertising that tells you you're overwhelmed or makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. It makes you feel negative. And this is life, this is living. I just want to see, that's what's inspiring to me. At my age, aspiration is a vibe, not necessarily a look. We're settled in what we look like. So we aspire to something that sparks more joy. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you. So how can we act as brands? So pain point advertising is incredibly alienating for these women. So a simple way of thinking about this is, where you're focusing on a loss or negativity, anti-aging, those kind of things, focus more on the positive, what can be enhanced, what can be achieved. Aspirational emotions as well are seen to be rarely communicated by brands. We need to do better at communicating the feelings and the emotional benefits, celebrate self-expression, individuality, and the joy of aging, help them rediscover their spirit versus trying to turn back the clock. There's a brand in the States called Better Not Younger, and I think that's a great way of thinking about this. This is not about becoming someone you used to be or turning back the clock. This is about being a better version of you at this age. And so things like, facial expressions and body language, we need to really think about how the self-assuredness, the freedom comes through. Still studio photography does not capture the real feelings and the attitude that they want to convey, that they have. Be aware of really contrived toxic positivity as well. Group shots where you see camaraderie and friendship were much preferred to things like lineups of women that we tend to see quite a bit now.
Yeah, I think on YouGov, we were looking at 60% of women in this era say they see themselves as adventurous and they like trying new brands and they're ultimately up for trying new things and feeling good. Like, how do you show a vibe in media? And I think this is where owned media planning really comes into its own. So how can you build a strong own media strategy, long form content that's inspirational, aspirational, fosters belonging. Like, how can you do like prioritize emotionally resonant placements within this group with trusted voices, and content that fosters that connection and belonging? I think women are really crying out for that connection. And secondly, I think it's really worth considering using media that creates impact, and lasting impact. So this cohort of women do not appreciate interruptive media. So think of like social media that constantly interrupts them. That's not going to work for them. You need like sustained value creation in your media.
We did take lots of imagery into the groups just to sort of, so it was all a little bit Getty imagery, but we took it in, sort of tried to tease out what people like, and the mood, the image, the aspirational, etc. And these were kind of some of the images that they were loving. So where you see a sense of community of, not perfect role model women, but a group of women that just look really interesting. You've got a sense of, a confidence, being reconciled with this age. Where you've got joyful imagery, that bottom image on the left, where you've got multi-generational. It doesn't matter what their age is, but there's like an inclusivity and there's a sense of joy. They're not limited by their age. They're all doing the same thing. And on the right hand side, I wish I was more like that fun, the free, don't care. That's the aspiration of like moving on, because there's a real strength and power to these women now, and they really want that to be reflected and to come through. And then our last insight is these women really feel that they're at a turning point. For some of them, there's a discernible, almost revelatory moment that they come to, a realization and a need for change. A lot of soul searching is going on, and they're at like this crescendo, almost enough is enough now. Some of them making some really dramatic or proactive life changes. So this woman at the top, my menopause has ended up with me changing jobs and leaving my husband. I feel like my whole world, my whole life has blown up. I almost feel like I'm starting all over again. Another woman talking about, I feel like I've come to a crossroads where I could carry on doing the same thing, or it's time to stop and reevaluate what's important in my life. Yes, it can be emotionally exhausting, but it's also incredibly positive time. And this is really this quote came from the groups, and this is a really powerful image as well. So I spent years, this woman saying, I spent years and years like a wooden horse going round and round and round, and now I'm breaking free. I'm moving to live my life, but not quite sure what that looked like yet, but a really positive and empowering time of her life. So how can we act knowing that women are at this turning point and they want to take action? So we can be a partner to women while they're making these really significant changes. It can be a safety net, can help them feel less overwhelmed. You can help them navigate like small nudges towards moving forward, or could be some of the bigger things as well. Show them what's on the other side of this door. Really present a positive and empowering, exciting picture, because they want to know that the best is yet to come. Not that their best years are behind them. There's a real hope and optimism, and that they want to feel it's, there's too much doom and gloom about this age and the problems. They really want to feel empowered and excited for the years ahead. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for new starts brands, whether that's about new financial starts or an independence, even from things to like rethinking your look or where you live, your hobbies, new training, new learning, socializing, anything. Talk about things like it's a new beginning, as opposed to turning back the clock or regaining something. This is about new starts.
Yeah, and I was thinking about how can media be a great partner with women while they're making these significant life changes. I think my first tip was use packaging as a lead media if you can. Not every brands have packaging, but it really is a secret weapon in creative effectiveness. How can you embed your brand in a relevant way, helpful way that really resonates with women? So be helpful, teach something to women, this cohort of women, within your brand's product if you can. And then my second tip is create media partnerships, long media partnerships. So think TV, print, audio. Think about how they integrate with creative content, multi-platform exposure, really connect with your brand's authenticity with really empowering narratives. Yeah, definitely media partnerships are the way to go with this one.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlie. So hope you've enjoyed those insights. There's lots more where that came from, but I think now's the time to bring our panelists into the conversation and have a chat. So I'm going to stop sharing, actually quickly grab a screen grab of that if you want to contact myself or Charlie, and we can continue the conversation. I'm going to end the screen show and hope I don't lose you. There you are. Brilliant. Right. So panelists, we've got a set of 3 or 4 questions to ask, and maybe anyone listening today can drop a note in the Q&A if you've got any burning questions. But first question, I'm going to ask this to Bronte first. What do you think are some of the most significant barriers to brands, media, better representing women? And maybe give us a clue as how we can start to overcome them.
It's a good question, and the research you did and talked through was really fascinating. And a lot of the stuff we do at Channel 4, our Mirror on the Industry project, we found very similar issues as well when it comes to representation. So I think a barrier we found, and often in advertising and marketing, is that we're really guilty of consolidating that mid-older life group into one homogenous group. And I know you touched upon it, but you think an average lifespan is up to 85 around that year. You think that's consolidating around 30 years of life into that one group, and that's a huge barrier, especially as you said, it's a group that has larger disposable income and are also often more time rich. I think when you said about the lost group and not feeling unnoticed, we also found that in our research. So we found 25% of ads represented people over the age of 50. And of that 25%, when we looked at representation of women, it was a lot smaller than men. So I think that really does show that there is space to grow within the advertising and really grow that experience. So I guess to overcome it, I think when looking at representation of age in ads, it's important to start really breaking down those older life groups, taking Gen X women sort of out of the shadows, exploring more 45 plus people in ads, but thinking about, like you said, the various life stages, the different experiences women go through, the behaviors, the motivations sort of throughout the ages, and also not just showcasing them in certain buying categories, like you said, in beauty or in fashion and retail. We see they over-index in representation of those brands, and also those that focus specifically on age. So it's really trying to, I guess, spread where they're represented in adverts across different categories is really important as well.
Yeah, I love that point you make about, it's not just the responsibility of beauty, fashion, women's categories to represent women. It's the responsibility of others. And if you can be a brand in finance or, other categories, you can probably shine a bit better because there's less people doing it well. So, it's a great point. Charlie, did you have any points to add in terms of the barriers? Why are there barriers here and what can we do to overcome them?
I think there's probably an element of a risk of getting it wrong or alienating younger generations and different parts of your audience group. But I was reading about it the other day, actually, and there is this belief that if you show women of an older demographic engaging with your brand, that will put off younger audiences. You hear a lot about that, but actually there's really current research that shows younger audiences are really curious and wanting to learn from women that are older than them, and they don't find us off-putting. It's always reassuring to know that you're not off-putting to other people, and so I think there is this curiosity, and I think younger women are wanting to see women later down the line that are bossing it. Do you know what I mean? And look up, and we really felt that in the event when we had this event, didn't we? Like, yeah, it was. So I think you just need to lean into, all your age groups, and we're not.
Yeah, we found in multiple sort of research studies and representation as well within ads that even if it's not directly associated to you, people still like to be shown that breadth of representation, and it really has a positive effect on brands. So even if, again, it isn't directly relatable, it's not something to be scared of, and it doesn't turn anyone else away. It really encourages brand perception as well. So it's definitely a positive movement to do.
Brilliant. I guess sometimes it might feel safer to do nothing, but actually what we're all saying is, you've that is not an option anymore. You've got to do better. So let's move on to the next question then, and I'm going to ask Dino maybe to come first for this one. How do you think specifically men in media, marketing, board level can help to improve representation with midlife women?
Thank you, Nikki, and Charlie. That was really great research. And apologies, there was a small interruption to what seemed to be by another Dina Mize-Lamptey account coming in. I'm not sure what happened there. I am the real Dina Mize-Lamptey. I think the first thing that I would say is that advertising definitely has a bit of a representation problem. And there is a lack of midlife women in the right seats, in the right rooms to help to make the right decisions when it comes to casting, when it comes to unstereotyping the messages that are communicated and how people are cast and positioned in ads. And I think that leads to generally a kind of some blind spots and some less kind of perceived kind of risk taking, a bit more safety in the judgment of what decisions are being made, and that just leads to kind of stereotypes and old tropes. But there is also a general kind of age bias in advertising generally. So I think that there's an issue of older people going missing on both sides, kind of men and women on both sides going missing. I think that's an issue that advertising has to deal with. We kind of glorify youth a little bit too much. And because it's a fast-paced kind of changing industry, we kind of think that all the skills and talent is in the young and the new, rather than the wise and slightly more mature and wisdom. So I think that in terms of the role for men, I mean, firstly, more men are in positions of leadership that are making these decisions. And I think it comes from leaders to dictate and direct largely the culture that you want in your company, but also but how you want your brand to operate as well. So of course, brands are there out there chasing profit, but there's good brands should be brave enough to kind of lead in certain directions and kind of tell consumers in the world, how they should live their lives. So I think that there's a real big role for brave leadership, which is but the word really is allyship, really, when you talk about it in a bit more detail. And allyship is knowing that you're not necessarily representing that minority. You're not one of those minorities, but you're kind of you're open to helping and speaking up for that minority group. And women as a whole aren't a minority group, but certainly this demographic, this segment that we're talking about is, particularly when it comes to advertising and it becomes to leadership positions in advertising as well, which is a key thing. So I think allyship is about kind of advocating and being really kind of brave in how you lead. One of my hats that you mentioned, many hats, is I'm one of the founder members of Media for All, and when we talk about change, we talk about a AAA effect, which is about awareness, action, and accountability. So the first thing is about being aware and acknowledging that, it is a problem. There are challenges that midlife women face, but also educate yourself on the value of the segment as well, the value of inclusion, and the fact that it does add to, the bottom line. It does represent, and people aren't offended by seeing midlife women on screens, things like that. And always educate yourself in terms of aware about the resources that are already out there as well. So there's great resources like the Unstereotype Alliance. They published a report called, Creative Bravery Beyond the Backlash, which I think everyone should read. There's also other great organizations like Visibility Inc. that are doing fantastic work there as well. And then it's about taking action, so taking kind of tangible steps to actually avoid and address the biases that are happening. Making sure there is kind of seats at the table, but there was also inclusive cultures and workplaces, and then it's the other way is about accountability. So making sure that whatever you kind of claim or your pledges or your progress is all kind of like measured, and it's transparently measured as well. So you hold yourself and your teams to account. I mean, the All In survey is great, it's a great industry study of representation, but what we're missing is the breakdown of these women across the industry. So we know that there's kind of pretty good representation in the media side of things, less so in creative side and less so in the brand side in terms of the brand owners. And that's what we've got to drill into, because no one really knows what those numbers are at the top of the C-suite of those people that are making decisions. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Dino. And there's kind of got questions from the listeners as well, but also just one point, only 6% of the advertising community are women over 50. So, you know, it's great that media are moving it forward. But does anyone in the group, does anyone know how the creative industry, or got examples of how the creative industry is trying to change this from inside? Or are we just praying that it sort of starts to improve with initiatives like this?
Look, I mean, there's definitely laziness, I think, and I'm talking from a creative point of view. It's ultimately our responsibility to write these characters and to write these narratives, so when they're out in the world, we're portraying women in the right way, and we're doing it in the wrong way because, as we've all just said, it's stereotyped because we're fucking lazy about it. We're obsessed with what Gen Z thinks. We wouldn't dare label Gen Z, but we're very happy to call someone a Karen or a fucking, crazy cat lady or a cougar, right? So I think we're lazy about it. That needs to change. I think we've got to remember that this is Gen X women. They were teenagers in the 90s. They created, girl power. They've got, as we said, so much life experience, so much to offer. And I think I'm not necessarily answering your question there, Nikki, but the fundamental point is I think it's just laziness. We're not putting enough effort in. So that's what needs to happen. And if you're in a position of if you're listening and you're in a position of creating either characters or narratives or storylines in order to sell products, in order to build brands, or you're judging that creativity, you've got to really, really challenge people now. There's so much opportunity to disrupt and to think differently about it. The big thing on this is also that young men need positive female role models, right? So it's not just a woman conversation. We've got to think about if we're trying to create positive change, how are we portraying women not only for positive female for role models for women, but also positive role models for men. I think that's hugely important. Laziness is the problem, and it's solvable. Be curious.
Do you think it's women's responsibility as well to put themselves forward and put themselves out there, or do you feel like it's
a conversation? It's a two-way conversation. I mean, Dino just mentioned it. It has to come from both parties. Fucking let's talk to each other.
Next question. So where have you seen or even been part of positive moves forward, so we can help people in the room understand maybe what good looks like? And it's okay if you haven't seen that as well.
I can go. I'm going to be Channel 4 bias, but I really think positive movements I've seen is sort of a lot of Channel 4 programming. Our remit is really sort of focused on midlife Gen X women. We've got Davina McCall's Sex, Myth and Menopause, which was a huge conversation starter. It broke down a lot of stigma and understanding this stage of womanhood. But we've also got, recently we've had Anna Richardson's Love, Loss and Dementia, so talking about her experience through caring. So that's different sort of experience in itself. And then we've got more light-hearted comedy, Sue Perkins' Big Adventure, for example, which is really nice, of showing like her going on travel shows, that adventure side of things. So just really showcasing all the different behaviors and experiences of that Gen X women. So I'd say that's sort of a positive. And then I'd also mention Tenor, who won our Diversity in Advertising Award in 2021, and that was looking at age representation. And it's a really lovely ad. I'd recommend anyone who hasn't seen it just to go watch it. But it's looking at a mother and daughter relationship and showing their two different life stages. But it was very inclusive. It felt very genuine, and they managed to show sort of that vulnerability whilst also empowering that group. So I'd say that was a really lovely example of a brand taking its time to understand its audience and then doing a really good job at showcasing it.
Thanks, Bronte. And you said something right at the beginning of that, which I think is great, which was it was a conversation starter. So Dean, program, because it doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers, but if you're opening up the conversation and providing a platform for people to come in, share and learn and move everything forward, I think that's just a brilliant way of thinking about it as well. Dino, what about you? Have you seen any positive moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, but before just talk about some of the positive moves, I mean, one of the things that the remarks I'll say, which is a bit kind of gives some explanation behind kind of Glenn's laziness point, is, you know, we're moving from a world where traditional kind of broadcast media has been in play. So when you're reaching masses of audiences and you're making big bets on big, expensive kind of commercials, people start to make choices about who do they target and who's the priority. And I think that, you know, we're transitioning to a world where there's much more fragmentation of media, there's lots more choices. You can be a lot more sophisticated in your targeting. It takes more effort and it's a bit scary, but you can. So, you know, the idea of whether you speak to this audience or not shouldn't really be a question. It should be how do you speak to them and where do you speak to them, rather than it necessarily making this kind of risky decision about changing your whole brand positioning to target a new audience. You know, you can do both. You know, if your audience serves both, then you can do both. So I think that's the first important thing. There are some obvious kind of brands that have always served this audience to some degree. But I think the ones that have, you know, that I kind of think about that talk, I mean, I recently saw some work from JD Williams and Channel 5 with Sky Media, which I think it's how they portray that audience, which I think is a refreshing thing more than anything else. You know, they know that their buyer is the midlife woman, but they're just portraying it in an unstereotypical way and doing lots of different kind of cuts and versions of that, which I think is really interesting. But I think that also, you know, there's great people and resources out there. I've seen a few talks recently by Dame Stephanie Shirley, who has an incredible story about dealing with these issues from like the 1960s and starting a company and calling herself Steve because she got more replies and things like that. I mean, you know, so the thing is, in terms of definitely look up these people and see what they're doing and how they've done it. But I mentioned that, you know, Visible Inc. You know, it's more organizations that are doing incredible things that are enabling more brands to find it easier to do what they're doing. So Jane Evans and Jackie Duckworth, who run that, you know, they're people to definitely get. They've got a pool of talent, right? A pool of talent, you know, for on screen, off screen, etc. And then there's resources as well. Back to the whole kind of there's an age thing going on in advertising as a whole. We also have to solve that problem full stop in a sense. You know, my personal point of view is that, you know, from an agency perspective, it's more of a wageism thing than it is an ageism thing. It's kind of like people are living longer. We know that people are valuable, but the model is so squeezed in terms of the revenue model that people become expensive headcounts when they get old. And I think we need to rephrase that and find more value in having people in businesses for longer, adding more value through their experience and contacts and all the rest of it. And there's a great study recently, a presentation I saw from the RSA, which is about the cost of workplace ageism, which I think, you know, everyone should try and Google and look up as well. But it shows about how, again, we're living longer. We've got a lot longer to kind of be around, survive, and technology is going to have a massive impact as well. And this kind of continual learning is just so valuable. So I think as a whole, we've all got to start thinking about how we maximize the resource of age. Yeah. And then I think I mentioned before the Unstereotype Alliance. They published that Creative Bravery and Beyond report as well. So there's lots of kind of guides and tips in there as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anyone else have any burning examples of people that are doing it well? Glenn or Charlie?
Well, I'll just make, because I'm acting as Heather on the call, I'll just make a quick plug for her Generation M brand and her MTIC cause. So Heather runs a business which is about understanding and knowledge around menopause, and she has a little sort of kite mark called the MTIC, which is encouraging brands to sort of create more products that are menopausal, helpful towards menopause in so many different areas. So I think as everyone's, you know, we love an uncomfortable conversation in this business, in this industry, and we've talked so much about the environment becoming a B Corp, mental health, gender, disability, fucking Brexit, whatever. We love tension. We love those conversations. If you consider that, and this was the best quote that I heard from Heather when we did this last time, which is she had a figure on this, but literally billions of dollars spent every year creating and promoting vegan products, and 3% of the population are vegan. 51% of the population will go through the menopause. And it's a taboo. It's something that we don't know enough. Women don't even, discuss it enough or understand it enough. So I think the more that we can understand menopause and open up that conversation, what I would do is, to the men on the call, I wouldn't go rushing into your colleagues and wives going, oh, let's talk about the menopause. I think it's definitely something that is for the future, but we need to get there very, very quickly, because as you said, it's something that affects 51% of the population. Okay, it affects everyone in society. So, and when you consider also that 1 in 3 women lie about having to take time off work due to the menopause. So they'll phone up sick saying I've got flu, when actually it's a menopausal issue of some sort. It's an issue that we need to get behind. So I'm just going to plug Heather's Generation M brand. Go and have a look at that.
Brilliant. Right, we're just about to wrap. I'm going to ask you for like your one key takeaway for people that are listening today. Like, what would you say? Like, take this away to help best represent. But just some amazing insights here, not least from the power of podcasts with this audience, to like, this is not one homogenous group. The call to leaders to really set the agenda and be allies to these midlife women, how we can foster more inclusive cultures. It's not about like, how do I do it? It's like, sorry, not should we do it? It's how we do it, looking at new media as opportunities. Start the conversation. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get all the answers. And I think just a call to all of us, to educate ourselves better in all areas of the midlife revolution, to push it forward. So now over to you as final closing statements, please. Can you tell me what one piece of advice would you each give people in brand, marketing or board level to help drive better change? Bronte.
I would say obviously representation with Gen X is important, but making sure you continue to show a sustained commitment to it. So representation in all comms, not just for a single product or brand or campaign or season. Don't forget about it. Make sure it's a continuous thing you think about, educate yourself and work towards. So that would be my piece of advice.
Brilliant. Don't be tokenistic with it. Dino.
Great. I would say look at your team. Does it reflect the real world? And also, this is excellent insight. So this is your opportunity to gain distinction and create a real gap. And with that, get your creative confidence back. This is all about confidence on both sides. So get your creative confidence back. Make some bold, big decisions and reach all audiences the way they want you to reach them.
Charlie.
Get to know your audience, I would say. Stop thinking of them as this homogenous group. Stop thinking about one age bracket. I joke about it a lot at work. I'm quite flippant with it. But when I turned 45, I zoomed into another tick box on TGI. But I'm not going to change overnight. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would definitely broaden out. Stop looking at demographics. Look at attitude. Yeah. Get to know your audience.
Glenn.
Don't be fucking lazy.
There's
nuance to this. Be as obsessed with this group as you are every other group. Knowledge is power. Learn about it, and then you can be brave.
Amazing. Look, we finished 1 minute early. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you to Charlie for all the work we've done together on this, and thank you to everyone listening. I hope you take away some really valuable insights and move the conversation forward. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Nikki. Thanks, everyone.